Good morning. When we're looking at Genesis 22, um, first thing we want to look at is context. And, God made this long standing promise to Abraham. He would become a great nation through his son Isaac. And Abraham and his wife, they waited a long time for Isaac. And Isaac represents God's promise. So we start out here, it's not about Abraham and his son, it's about God's promise being put at risk. Now, we look in verses 1 and 2, we see where God commands Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. And starting right out, he says, "It came to pass after these things, God tested Abraham." So he tells us right off the start, this is a test. He don't want us to be reading and wondering. He tells us this is going to be a test. And so you and I know right off that it's a test. Abraham doesn't, but he's in the dark. But we know right off that this is a test. And we notice, in verses 3, Abraham rose early. His obedience was immediate. And we see that Isaac, carries the wood, and we see all these little details. And then Isaac says, well, where's the lamb? It's like, well, what's going on? We're going to do this, but where's the lamb? And of course, Abraham responds that God will provide for himself the lamb. And I agree with the professor in this. And Abraham wasn't, I don't believe, saying that God will provide you, as a sacrifice. I believe Abraham was saying God will provide for himself the lamb because he promised me his son. And I trust him that he's not going to take his son from him. And he had faith in God that he wouldn't take his son. He would actually provide a ram. And, something else that was interesting is, we don't see any resistance from Isaac. Abraham binds him and he raises a knife. We don't see any resistance from Isaac mentioned, which is interesting. And here the story kind of slows down. It's kind of it's the peak. It's the very top of the peak, and then we see where God stops Abraham at the last second, and a ram is provided. And we see God didn't ultimately desire the sacrifice of Isaac. He just wanted to test Abraham to know that he was going to be obedient. And this reveals the trust of Abraham, but it also reveals God's character. And and Abraham, it wasn't just someone he didn't know, but he knew God and he knew the character of God. So that's why he trusted him. He put his faith in him because he knew that the character of God. And he knew that God was testing, but he didn't desire destruction of his son that he promised him. So he had that faith that God would actually provide. And so and I think that an application um, for this is, we need to trust God when it doesn't make sense. You know, um, when we don't see how things are going to work out, we just trust Him. We study His Word. We know God. The more we study, the more we know the character of God, and the more we trust Him. It's just like a friend. The more we spend time with that friend, the more we know them, the more we know their character, and the more we trust them. And we may not know exhaustively everything about them, just like we can't know exhaustively everything about God, just what He reveals to us. Just like that friend, they have things we don't know about. They don't want to reveal to us. And that's the same way with God. But the more we know Him, the more we commune with Him, the more we trust Him. When we don't know what's going to happen, we put our trust, we put our faith in Him. And so ultimately, we need to realize that God is a provider. He's not a destroyer. He is our provider. And He provided the sacrifice. He didn't want to destroy Isaac. He just wants you and I to be obedient. And He wants to know that we are obedient to Him. And Isaac was, and Abraham was. And God provided that sacrifice.